what does that even mean?
And then
so-
letting folks know that they can also print that ballot and bring it with them as a cheat
Yes,
sheet, like that's
so-
legal.
Yeah, and so it's so helpful to like tell
Mhm.
people that, because
Yeah.
I don't think that people know.
They don't know.
People
I
are
hear
just,
that all the
you
time,
get
yeah.
there and then you're
Yeah.
like, wait, can I talk? Can I ask a
Right.
question? What are, like, what
Right.
bubbles? What are all these other
Yeah.
things? And so,
And also I keep trying to flag this number here. It looks like, it's a 1-877 number. You'll get a live person from my office on the phone.
cool. Okay.
I'm actually hiring more folks right now to make sure that as the call volume increases, when
Yeah.
somebody calls that number, they get a human on the phone to
Oh,
ask
that's
their
awesome.
question.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
didn't know
so
that.
it's another resource for people who maybe aren't as tech savvy and don't want to click around a website. We get any and all questions that you can imagine at
Mhm.
that call center, so
Awesome.
just share that resource as well.
Well, I'm
Awesome.
almost done setting things up
Okay.
here.
Yeah, I think we can totally flow from
Yeah,
here.
let's just.
And you probably explain this in your sleep. In my mind, I like to throw things out and then throw it over to someone else, like, what
All
about
right.
those parents that have high schoolers?
So we are live,
Yeah.
and thank you all for those that are in person, those that are on Zoom, those that are on Facebook, in many different forms. We appreciate you joining tonight as we are going to talk about voting. Now, let me explain what in the world are we doing on tonight. What is Friendly Conversations? So Friendly Conversations is a program of Friendship Community Services. Friendship Community Services started in the late 90s as Friendship Academy. Friendship Academy was all about community education. It was people within the community educating the community, right, on different topics. It started like with sewing and maybe computers and gardening and things like that. From that point, a group was formed to start Friendship, actually what the charter school called Friendship Academy of the Arts, which still exists right now. So when the name changed to Friendship Academy of the Arts, the nonprofit changed the name to Friendship Community Services. But the basis of community education still remained the same. So now in this new era of different ways we can do things, we want to, let me change that up a little bit. We want to really highlight how we can educate people in person, on social media, on Zoom, using all of the different avenues that we have. So we call it Communiversity. We named it something, we branded it, Communiversity, and it's where the community educates itself. And this series is called Friendly Conversations. So what Friendly Conversations is gonna be is a series, like a podcast style series where different experts, different leaders in the community come and talk about different topics, okay? Concerning that relate to our community. So tonight, my name is Dr. Chavez Russell. I'm the pastor, and I'll be your is it host or facilitator? I don't know what I'll be, but I'll be moderating the conversation on the night. All right. So so let's go through some introductions. Now, I meant to ask you before we went live how to say your last name.
Just like it looks, although nobody gets it right, Hazlip.
Hazlip.
Yeah.
Okay, we have Miss Melanie Hazlip from the Secretary of State Office, and we have Miss Shamika Bogan from the Strong Roots Foundation. So can you just introduce yourself and your role and what you hope to accomplish and kind of what you're working on in the community and what you hope to accomplish in our conversation on tonight?
Yes. So first of all, thank you for having me. I'm super happy to be here. My name is Melanie Hazliff. I'm the voter outreach director at the Office of the Secretary of State. And that means that I just spend my days working with partners like you here at this table all across the state, making sure that their communities know how to access voting. Everything that we do is nonpartisan. We just want to make sure that every eligible Minnesota knows how to vote. And so we recognize that I'm not always the trusted messenger, and Secretary Simon's not always the trusted messenger in communities, but you are. Folks like you who are in the communities and on the ground and have the relationships. So we work with partners like you just to get the resources and information out there. And I've been there for 2.5 years now, but I've done this work since 2016. I usually was a volunteer, and so if I weren't getting paid by the Secretary of State, I would still be out there as a volunteer doing this work
Yes.
because I just love it so much.
Amen. Well, we thank you for being here tonight. And Ms. Shanika?
Awesome. Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here with you all. Additionally, just thank you for the work that you guys do. You've been doing this for a long time, even before you were the head pastor here, and I'm just grateful for Greater Friendship as a whole, because from the school, community services, church, all of it, you all really focus on meeting people where they are, and that's really important. So thank you.
Thank you.
For me, as you mentioned, I'm with the Strong Roots Foundation. That's my organization. I wear a lot of different community hats. But tonight here is that one, and voter engagement, voter outreach has always been a big focus of mine, working hand in hand with the churches, specifically with the African American church, doing Souls to the Polls initiative, but as well as just helping people get relatively simple but important and culturally friendly information. That's a big thing. There's a lot of information out there when it comes to voting, and there's a lot of misinformation as well. And so I think
talk about that too.
yes, so I think it's important to get simple information across and get valid information across, but to do it in a culturally relevant way, because sometimes people won't ask the question. And so I try to say during election season, I'm here as a resource if people have questions, if people want to see sample ballots. Some people don't even know that that's a thing. So for me, it's a part of my personal mission, just with being helpful with that and working with groups like all of you.
Well, we appreciate y'all being here tonight. Now, if you're online or joining on Zoom, you can put your comments or questions in the chat. I am monitoring both the Facebook and the Zoom, and we have Reverend Coleman here. Reverend Coleman is one of our associate ministers. You know, I'm curious as to what you look to learn from tonight about voting and things like that. So,
I look to learn of other rationalizations for the vote, because we have a whole segment of society that is against the vote right now in the communities. If you're in the community, you will hear several young folks say, my vote doesn't count, it's a waste of my time, they're not going to fix things. And so when I'm trying to learn from the people who are activists, what are you saying to individuals when they have that opinion? My response is, look, people died that you could vote. You know, mine goes back to the 60s because I'm a 60s baby. So for me, it's a simple rationalization. But for these new kids, they're kind of removed from that struggle. And so they don't see the validity. So I'm here to learn, how do you make it valid from both of you? How do you make it valid to the community to say, oh yes, I'll vote. I want to see what excites high schoolers to vote and what excites community to vote again after all of the disappointments or perceived disappointments.
That's great. That's great. And if you have something that you would like to see, what you would like to learn or you would like to discuss, please put it in the chat. And we'll definitely ask that question. So since that question was asked, let's ask that question. How do we address that that the negative or the apprehension of people that just are eligible to vote? Before we even get into the different ways to vote, we got to deal with that. You know, that's the first question that came up. How do y'all deal with that question? Why should I vote? And maybe I'll just leave it there and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. I have lots of answers to that. And we hear that exactly your rationale comes up a lot. People died, people bled for the right to vote. But for young kids, that's so far back, they don't care, right? And so the word that I keep hearing tonight is community. And that's one way that I frame it, is that communities that vote get the power. They get the resources, they get the recognition from elected officials. So communities, however you define it, is that your age demographic, is that this geographical location, the church, a different demographic that you identify with. But when you're talking to young kids, young people, in Minnesota, they vote at about 20 percentage points less than the older generations. So who do you think gets the power? The older generations. They get the recognition from their elected officials because they're the ones that turn out and vote. What young people now are poised to do, they have the numbers to seize the power. They have the numbers in their favor, the Gen Zers and the millennials, to actually take the power, but they're just not voting.
Mm.
And so they're leaving all of that power on the table. But if you look at the data and you look at the numbers, it's there for them to take if they would just show up at the polls. And then the other thing that we tell people is, okay, you may say that you don't care about politics. You hear that a lot. I don't care about politics. They don't do anything for me. These politicians don't do anything for me. You don't care about politics, but politics cares about you. No matter what the issue is in your life, it is impacted by politics, whether it's everything, whether it's your kids' schools being funded, whether it's college tuition, healthcare, climate change. Who's gonna plow your streets in winter? Because we live in Minnesota and that's
Or
a
even
big
the
deal.
cost of your hot Cheetos.
Exactly. All of that is impacted by politics. So you don't care about politics, but politics cares about you.
Yes, yes, I like the way you use power. Because I think that would resonate. And voice, right? Because it's like, this is a generation that has more voice than I think ever. I mean, so many different platforms where they can express their voice. And I think voting is one of those things where you can speak the loudest and have the biggest impact. So how do you address
Absolutely.
that?
Well, you took number 2, like right off of top of my list. For me, I was born in the 90s. And so I feel like I'm 34 now. So I'm one of those people that's at that age where part of my generation feels like that. And then the other part's kind of like, it doesn't matter anyway. They're going to do what they want to do. Something for me that became important with like getting involved in politics, I was totally anti-politics. Like I was like, okay, it's important to like vote for the president. Outside of that, sounds good. It's great if you understand it to do it. Only to, like you said, find out that it affects everything, regardless if we like it or not. And so for me, when I'm talking to people, I'm reminding them that it affects you regardless if you speak into it or not. If you're not speaking for yourself, someone else is speaking for you. And that is like one of the most dangerous things because we have a lot of complaints about what we do and don't like. But if we're not speaking up for ourselves, if we're not putting the right people in office to represent us, like that's the thing, we have the power to put people in office. So if we don't say anything, if there's 4 of us here and 1 or 2 of us is voting, and then someone goes to represent us and they're speaking for us, how can we be mad if we were like, whatever. Like, how can we be mad if we let that one person speak for our entire group like that? And so that is my biggest thing when I'm talking to people and, even people that were how I were before, it's, if you allow other people to speak for you, then you get bad results. So that's probably my biggest thing to remind people that someone's always speaking for you. There's always a plan. When we look at, just a number of different things like healthcare or something that was news to me probably about 5 or 6 years ago, our highway projects, that they planned those for 20 years out. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then I was like, wait, 20 years? Like, that is such a long time. The people that were speaking to that 5 years ago, they were planning it before that. People that were speaking to that 10 years ago. And so there's so many things like that. There's community planning things. And when we look at new buildings being built and new areas being built, it's like, wow, they just, that went up quick. How long has that been a plan? And we were not paying attention at the city council meetings, or we were not speaking and telling people what we needed for our community. So it's definitely one of those things that, like, if you are not at the table, you are definitely on the menu with that, and it's an issue, like, really. So that is my biggest thing.
Yeah, you talk about people speaking for me, when I have my own voice.
Yep.
When I have my own values. You also talked about something very important. It's like, it's so much stuff that we don't see that take place all around us.
Yeah.
And we see the final result. We see the highway going up. We see the building going up, but we don't see the plans. And those plans are connected to some type of policy, some type of regulation. So that voice that we are exercising with our vote sends people in rooms that we don't see to represent our values. Now, me, I come from the perspective of a pastor, where I said on Sunday, I don't use the pulpit to promote politics, or any particular politician. But I do use the pulpit to promote participation in the process, because if we look at, from a biblical perspective, how the rulers always consulted the prophets, should I pursue? So what does that mean? That means that, yes, that sends a signal that we should be involved in this process. And you're talking about power, you're talking about exercising the power to have people that in office, in those rooms, in those back rooms that represent the values that we represent,
Right.
to where we can know, we can sleep at night.
Yeah.
And know that, yes, God is in control. He's always in control, but know that I did my part.
Yes.
And I participated in the opportunities that were given to me. So when you talk about, I'm looking at the list that you sent in terms of some of the things that you like to cover.
Can I quickly make
yes.
a direct connection
yes.
between the two words you said there a couple times, policy and values? Policies are really just your values. That's just the politician's word for values, right? If you're, any policy that's out there is just reflective of that person's value.
Wow.
And so you think, I don't care about the policies that they're creating. Well, you do though, because you have values that you hold, and those are reflected directly in those policies.
Yeah, I guess I never really looked at it like that, but it's like, yeah, that's true. So when we think about, so if you're just joining us, whether you're on Facebook or Zoom, I see we got a few more people to join us on Zoom. Feel free to put your comments or questions or anything that you would like to address. But yeah, primary elections are already happening, huh? So can you talk about that a little bit in terms of, I just see it's a primary election, just so people will understand that we don't have to wait till voting day. We can go ahead and exercise that now.
Yeah, so here in Minnesota this year,
Not primary, I mean, early voting.
Early voting has begun. Yeah, I was gonna say, we actually had 3 statewide elections this year in Minnesota, which was very exciting. We had 2 primaries, but early voting has already begun. Early voting began on Friday. And so any eligible voter can vote right now in the presidential election. You can either vote early in person or you can vote absentee by mail. If you go to mnvotes.gov, that's where you could either request your absentee ballot be mailed directly to you, put it at your kitchen table, fill it out at your leisure, take your time to do your research, and then mail the ballot back in. We give you a prepaid return envelope, all the instructions included. And then you can actually track your ballot through the process, just like you track your Amazon package to your door.
Oh, wow.
You can track your ballot. It's connected to you, the voter, with a special barcode, and watch it to make sure it gets all the way back to the county elections office. Or go to mnvotes.gov.
I didn't know that. I didn't know you could track your ballot.
Yeah, go to mnvotes.gov to find your early vote site. It's usually a county office or a city office. It's not your local polling place on election day, but there's a county office that you could go to go vote in person if you would rather do it that way. So 46 days of voting in Minnesota between September 20th and November 5th. So no excuse not to participate.
I got a lot of questions about that. But I want to take a step back. Because Shamika said something on the call earlier today, when she talked about, everybody knows the presidential election. And we talking about voice, right? How would you talk about the importance of participating in primary elections, participating in local elections, participating in off-cycle elections? Because I look at it as, yes, we all see when the presidential election comes, but I think it builds the habit and the practice of voting and being an informed voter, not just on sound bites. Because, I think we probably get to misinformation and stuff like that. But how would you talk about the importance of participating on that level?
Absolutely. Well, for me, that goes into why I tell people that it's important to vote in general. I think that we see, the president, or you see the mayor, or you see the governor, you see the bigger roles, and they're very important. I'm not diminishing that at all. But I think sometimes, as far as like the local races, we don't realize like how important the state senate is, or the state representatives, or the federal senate, or the federal representatives. I don't know if people really, that kind of goes back to like that civics. Like, I don't know if people are like me, I we didn't pay attention a whole lot when it was necessary to pay attention, and feel like I learned that a little bit late, that you know, that the governor signs are the bills from the House and Senate. The bills that the president signs are the bills that come from the federal Congress. And so like, when you think about that, you think about how many people that is that have to agree on legislation, specifically like in the Minnesota Senate, there's 67 senators. And so, yes, we may vote and like send one person off, like, go represent us. This is great. But they have to work as a team. They have to work as a team with people from Minneapolis, people from St. Paul, people from St. Cloud, people from, like, it's a whole entire process for how you get something across. And I think that when we don't realize how important those local elections are, when you do realize it, it's like, oh, like, they are actually speaking for me in my area. Like, they're sent there to represent me, to speak, and then they have to agree, and there's give and take, and there's all these other things. Same thing with like city council. Sometimes people look at that as like, oh, okay, you know, city council's running, great. But they represent you. Like, when you think of what ward you're in and what area you're in, they're sent to represent you on that city level. County commissioners, they're sent to represent you on the county level. And so I think they're all very important, but on the scale of like what affects like your everyday living, those local elections really are what affects it.
Yes, yes. You know what? I was at the Capitol this summer advocating for no menthol. I think it was no menthol. And we were sitting down with a representative, and a lot of times our community don't write in as much, don't write our elected officials as much, because we don't feel like we are heard. But when I was sitting at that table and they said they actually count how many letters come in on a certain topic, and then get that to the representatives and say, we had this many letters to come in around this topic. And that is what they go to the floor and they advocate from their constituents. And they go and advocate on the floor for those particular topics. And what was surprising, it wasn't a bunch of letters. It's not like, well, it depends on the issue, you know, but most part, they're like, it's not even like 1,000 letters, it's like maybe a few hundred. And now they count it, and then now that directs that representative as to which way to go. So and then another thing I learned about caucuses and all that kind of stuff, and how you can, whatever political party, this is a nonpartisan conversation, but whatever political party you want to represent, that you have a voice on the ground level. So how does the Secretary of State interact with any like caucuses? You know, do y'all get information out in terms of how to get more information about that level of voting, that level on the ground level of voting?
The caucuses are a party-run affair.
Okay.
So we don't do anything with the caucuses, but the local elections, absolutely.
Okay.
We really, this kind of outreach that I do happens year-round, no matter if it's an odd year or an even year, because there are always elections happening. There were elections last year, there will be elections next
Can you
year.
talk about that, like the different elections?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you got them on top of your head, but just the different stages other than the presidency.
Yeah, so the really local elections that you were talking about earlier, city council, mayors, cities get to decide when they host those. So actually that's on the ballot in St. Paul. I live in St. Paul. We're deciding this year if we want those local elections to move to the even years, the presidential years, or keep them on the odd years. And there's arguments for and against both sides of that. But every year there are a number of cities that have local elections. And so the really important thing to remember there is, first of all, like you said, that's the day-to-day impacts on your lives, your snow removal, your garbage haulers, the status of your sidewalks and your bus stops. Those really local things that impact you every single day are determined in those elections. But also because they have lower turnout, your vote goes that much farther.
Mm,
You have that much more of a say because not that many people will turn out. And it's usually sort of just the politicos that turn out for that, right? So is that really a representative democracy?
Mm.
If it's sort of just those die-hard politicos and not just everybody, you know, your everyday Joes showing up for those? So we really want folks to turn out for those elections. And then in addition to the president, the state representatives, like you mentioned, they're up every single 2 years in Minnesota. The senators are up every 4 years. And so there are always people on the ballot, no matter what year it is.
Can I ask you a question?
mhm.
Outside of what you just said, and this is not, it may come off as an attack, but it's not. I'm just interested in who, at this point, is working on what my pastor mentioned. Who is working to get folk out on the so-called uneven election cycles? Who's working for that, because I have a friend, and I'm being very honest, he just got a $500,000 contract on 494. And he worked for the state for like 25 years and retired because of whatever he was going through. So who would I look for in my location? I'm here in South Minneapolis, that's really advocating for a response from the community on those odd elections that you just mentioned, about the power, about who determines if they're gonna George Floyd. I have nothing. I've been here for 2.5 years and I just don't know. So I feel kind of shamed right now, but who do I look to in that case? Because I can't see you being in all of these local or localities with one person. So do you have a on the ground, grassroots team, or are we looking toward people like from, what'd you say, Strong Roots?
Strong Roots
Are we looking
Foundation.
for a Strong Roots Foundation for that kind of push? Or is that push coming from your office?
It's definitely both. My outreach team is only a team of 3, and for the majority of my 2.5 years here, it was a team of 1. So you're right.
Congratulations.
It was exciting. The state legislature, they got me my additional 2. So
Nice.
they gave us additional funding to have some additional resources. But so that's where, like I said, we work really hard with the partners, the nonprofits, the church groups, the businesses, the local businesses. We try to sort of do a train the trainer where we give the information to you, the community partners, to make sure that they're disseminating the information.
Okay.
And then also the campaigns. The campaigns are always really active too.
Okay.
And that would be partisan, the work that I do with the nonprofits and the businesses is nonpartisan, but the campaigns are always active as well, those local
Thank you.
campaigns.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I want to get into some of the, the obvious things, voter registration. And how it works in Minnesota, real basic information. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, so mnvotes.gov.
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 Yep.
So just to start at the very beginning, in order to vote in Minnesota, you have to be a United States citizen, a resident for 20 days, 18 years or older. 16 and 17-year-olds can now pre-register to vote. So let's just flag that. I have a flyer here on that. They can't vote, but they can pre-register using the exact same process that you or I would use to register. And that pulls them into the process a little bit sooner, getting them thinking of themselves as voters before they are. And then now another flyer, as long as you are not currently incarcerated for a felony offense. So again, a result of the state legislature, those state races, they passed that bill in 2023. In Minnesota, prior to 2023, you had to complete your whole sentence. You had to be done with supervised release, parole, probation before you could vote. And the reason it was important for that law to get passed was that we have some shorter incarceration times in Minnesota, but relatively long parole times. And so people were living in their communities for years, decades, paying their taxes, going to work, sending their kids to schools governed by school boards, but they couldn't vote. So we know that law impacted about 55,000 Minnesotans when it was passed. Huge expansion of voting rights. And I'm just using this as an excuse to talk about this a little bit because it's a big topic that I always want to mention. Because it impacted so many people, we're really trying to get the word out there for that. So those are the folks who can qualify to register. Go to mnvotes.gov. And if you have the last 4 digits of your social and or your Minnesota ID, you need one of those 2 things. And then you just plug in your name and address. And that's it. It really takes 3 minutes. That's it. That's your easiest way to go. We also have paper registrations that you can download and print, but then you have to mail that back in. So it's a little bit more cumbersome. But really, mnvotes.gov is very easy.
Do we have same day registration?
We do, yeah.
Okay.
So if you wanted to go to mnvotes.gov and register ahead of the election, the deadline for that is October 15th. But if you miss the deadline, we have same day registration. And that's where you would need to bring your Minnesota ID with your current name and address. If you've moved or changed your name, then you just bring a document that you can show on your phone. It can be electronic, that states your current name or address, so like a phone bill or a utility bill, something like that.
So if I don't make it October 15th, I gotta wait to the day of the election.
So even if you wanted to go vote early in person at one of those early.
Oh,
vote
if I
sites,
want to
you
go
could-
vote early in person,
Yeah.
I can register
Yeah.
that day.
Yeah.
and then- Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good. So Shamika, you do a lot with the African American churches.
I do.
And I don't know kind of where we are with how many registered voters we have. I don't know if you have those numbers, but can you talk about some of the things that you do or some of the support that's needed in order to engage? You know, we talked about the importance of the why, the voice, the power, everything like that. So now, like, what does it look like in the work that you do to try to engage more of our community so we can realize the power that we actually have?
Absolutely. I think just the strategy behind doing things collectively. This is not with voting. This is something that churches, especially the Black church, has been doing and organizing for a long time. A part of what I do, like when we do Souls to the Polls, the idea behind that is just being there to be a resource. Because as you ask the question, like, does your office do that, or who does that? That's always a big deal in our community, like having the capacity to do those things. It's such a robust thing that needs hands-on and people and information and flyers and who has the knowledge and who can put it into, you know, a format that we can easily distribute to people. And so for me, a part of that is just being there to be a resource and adding that capacity of saying, hey, church partner, I'm here to help. It doesn't cost you anything. I'm here to help. How can I assist? You don't have time to pull something that I'm always talking about is sample ballots. A lot of people don't know that you can go on to the mnvotes.gov. I'm like in the yes, mnvotes.gov, and you can put in your zip code and you can put in your exact address and look at a sample ballot, like in ballot form, not just like words that are on the screen, but in ballot form. And a lot of times we won't ask those questions because you just should know. People assume that you should know, but a lot of people don't. And even like with these flyers that are here, and we can go on and I can go link some of these after this is over so people can see them. Same thing with like voting with a criminal record. You might not have people that will like call your office. Some people might, but you might not have a lot of people that will like call your office and say, hey, like I was in jail and I just got out and can I vote? Like that might not be what they're thinking about, but even like within our churches, like how do we make sure that they have those tools and those resources to say, hey, you can without anybody asking. And then that sparks people to be like, oh, wow, like I didn't know. 55,000 people in the state of Minnesota, that is such a big number. Like that is a lot of people. And, you know, one of the big arguments behind that with leading up to passing that was a lot of these people, like you're still paying taxes. So we're saying you can't vote, but you're going to pay taxes. And so to have that right restored, and when we talk about recidivism and all of those things, like it is a really awesome thing to have done and accomplished.
And like,
so-
can I tell you, it's the
Yes.
largest expansion of voting rights in Minnesota with one bill since the late 1970s.
Wow.
When the voting age was changed from 21 to 18.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just a fun fact.
Yes,
Wow.
no.
That's a big
That's just such a huge implication, right?
Yes.
But that shows why we put certain people that's in those rooms
Mhm.
that represent our values, that see what
Yes.
we see. Man, these people paying taxes and not like, you know, the greed and everything like that is real people that really care about people.
Absolutely.
And their lives that live in the communities with us and things like that.
Exactly.
But-
It's our friends, it's our family, it's our
Mhm.
neighbor, it's people that are raising kids. Like you don't know who is going through what. And so for something like that to be restored, it's awesome because they should have a say in what's happening.
Mm.
And so for me, it's really just those initiatives of like being a resource, being helpful. Sometimes churches will say, you know, yes, we want to stay nonpartisan, but we just don't have capacity to like, we would love to register people after church to vote, but we don't have capacity to do it. I'm able to come in and say, hey, I've got a group of volunteers or people that will come and just sit at the table after church and be helpful. Or some people may say, am I registered? Like I moved, what does that look like? Like I was, you know, on the right path, did all the right things, and now I moved and like forgot what is going on because I haven't done this in a while. So just to be helpful with those things. And then lastly, excuse me, souls to the polls is always a big thing that
So we're gonna
churches.
come back to that.
Okay, I was gonna say that's.
I want to tie it to another
Yes.
basic
Oh, no, go ahead.
voting. But how, if a church wants to participate, we heard mnvotes.gov,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, you got it.
mnvotes.gov, that I'm telling you, you'll find all of your voting information there. It's an amazing website, but how do people get in contact with you? If a
Yes.
church wants to participate or a community organization want to participate to help figure out a bill capacity and things like that.
For sure. I can drop that information in there, but reaching out via email, people Facebook me randomly. My number is kind of plastered all over stuff. You know, I'll say it out loud, but I'll go back and drop it in there. But my cell phone number is 612-735-5998. And so 612-735-5998. And then also my email, Strong Roots Foundation, mn@gmail.com. But I'll go back on there and drop that stuff. And again, whatever the church is, wherever they are, whoever the individual is, one of the biggest things, similarly to the question that you asked of the who, a lot of times, and you spoke on this too, on like, if I didn't do this work for work, I would still be a volunteer. There are so many people that are just regular people that are passionate about this. And sometimes they just need 2 or 3 to loop together to say, how can I help? I want to volunteer. This is like a seasonal thing or a thing that they may say, I want to work on this year round. It's just a few people getting together. And so I am absolutely open to those conversations with what that looks like and how we can be helpful. Because again, it's just about being a resource.
So train the trainer who can train the people,
Mhm.
you know?
Yes.
The community.
So the community. So another basic thing I want us to cover, voting location.
Yes.
And I kind of want to add something to that because it kind of leads into the souls for the polls. From the Secretary of State perspective, like the disabled, the elderly, what kind of support do y'all offer to help those people? Because Shamika works, you know, she can't get enough vans to get everybody in the state where they need to be.
Yeah.
You know, so what kind of work does the Secretary of State, one, how do I know where I vote? And then what type of support the Secretary of State or work do they do to help those that have trouble getting to the polls?
So, Emmett, we'll start off. You enter in your address, we have a poll finder tool. You
Okay.
enter in your address and it'll show you your exact polling location, the address, the building it is, the hours of operation. I should note that tool, requesting your absentee ballot, what's on my ballot, and I'm blanking on one right now. Those tools are also available in 11
Tracking
different
my ballot?
languages. Tracking my ballot.
Mhm.
Those are available in 11 different languages.
Wow.
So
Wow.
and you know, most of the languages spoken here in Minnesota, based on the 2020 census data. So we made the languages relevant, but you can access those in those languages. But we have the poll finder tool, and then I will say, we have a call center number that's listed on our website. We have people calling all the time, just saying, hey, where's my polling place?
Mhm.
Because some people don't want to check out a website, they want to talk to a person.
Mhm.
So if you call our office, you will get a live person on the phone, and we'll help you find your polling place. Rides to the polls are always an issue. There's no good system in place. It's really tricky. There are over 4,000 polling places on election day. So there's no overarching organization that besides an org like Souls to the Polls, which is more localized, that does rides to the polls. The the best answer that we have, and many people don't like it, and I don't blame them, is if you contact the party that you plan to vote for. So if you plan to vote Republican and you call that party and say, hey, I want to go vote, but I can't get there, they're pretty motivated to get you to go vote, right? So that's your best bet. But there are other options for voters who are, that have disabilities or who
Yes.
are older. We really push absentee voting. You can vote early by mail for any reason at all. You can also do something called curbside voting. People are unaware. Just like it sounds, as long as you can get in a car, you can get to your polling place and you let them know ahead of time that you're coming. 2 election judges,
okay.
one from each party, will come to your car, bring you your ballot. You fill it out in your car. Those 2 election judges bring it back inside and put it in the tabulator.
Wow.
So that's an option as well. And then all polling places are supposed to be ADA accessible.
Okay.
That's mandated by state and federal law. And then we conduct polling place accessibility surveys every single year just to make sure that they are.
So when is like the cutoff for absentee ballot voting? If I'm somebody that's elderly or disabled and I know I can't get there.
Yep. The mail this year is moving a little bit slow, and so we're cautioning people to make sure they give enough time. Request your absentee ballot now if you know that you're gonna want to vote absentee. Really about 8 to 10 days, give yourself 8 to 10 days to mail it back in. There's no hard cutoff, but the ballot has to be received at the elections office by 8 PM on election day. So you gotta just think about the mail and how long do you think it's
Okay.
gonna take?
So 10 days.
Yeah.
From what's the date of the election?
November 5th.
November 5th.
Yeah.
So what's 10 days before that? That's October
26th.
Yeah.
26th?
Yeah.
So that you gotta have it mailed in by October 26th, and you gotta think 10 days before that to request it, right?
Yeah.
So you gotta request it no later than October 16th. If you know you're not gonna be able to make it to the polls, you gotta request it by October 16th. You gotta, well, as soon as you get it, mail it back in that day.
Yeah.
But no later than October 26th. I would say the 25th.
And there's also secure Dropbox locations. We have a list of them on our
Oh,
website.
wow, you ain't got to, so you don't have to go to your polling location, y'all got drop boxes, right?
Yeah, you
Wow.
can't return an absentee ballot to your local polling place. The election judges won't touch it. It has to go.
It has to go, okay,
Yeah.
okay,
And
so it has
so-
to go in the mail or the drop box.
Yep, and
see, I'm
you
learning
can
something.
find that list of Dropbox, and they're secure, they're locked, they're emptied frequently, so you know and again, you can still track it. Even if you drop it in a ballot Dropbox, you can still track it to make sure it made it all the way to your county elections office.
Nice.
Yeah.
So now we have the local support that's called Souls to the Post. Can you talk more about that and how people can let other people know or get involved or churches get involved or organizations? Can you just really talk about Souls to the Post, getting people to the poll?
Yes.
And the celebration that you normally have.
Yes, for sure. So again, that is a local, Souls to the Polls is a national thing.
Oh, it's a national thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
let me say it's a national thing, but it's locally organized. So it's not any particular, like, I own Souls to the Polls or you own Souls to the Polls. It's something that is nationally recognized, and you'll hear that throughout different communities. A lot of times it's done specifically in like African-American communities, specifically through the Black church, but of course, anyone's welcome to be a part of it, but that's where it kind of originates at. And the focus on that is really like kicking off right around that October, late September, October timeframe, and going all the way up to election day. And especially those last 2 weeks before the election is always those voting weekends. And so specifically like for churches, that is a big push, because having Sunday voting is an amazing thing. When you're at a church and you're trying to motivate people, like, actually, we're gonna all go together today. And so for the last several years, that's been something that I've been involved in and had the pleasure with working with you all and other churches with organizing. It's always room for other churches that want to do it. There's a number of different ways. The typical format for it is saying, okay, these 2 Sundays, we're going to promote it, you know, a month leading up to it, saying that we're doing Souls to the Polls on this Sunday, which is the last Sunday that's in October, and then the first Sunday that's in November. We're all gonna have church together, end at a certain time, and caravan to the polls. And it's just something where people really kind of get to do it as a group. People like doing things as a group, and so that it just motivates people to get out there and do that. And so we do have a big block party specifically for Minneapolis. There's a big block party that takes place. When you think about like those local places, it's one thing to like vote at your city hall and vote at the election center, and those are all great places. But sometimes, especially like with older people or people are taking their kids with them, some people like to do those more community-based locations where they're comfortable. So like in North Minneapolis, like the Urban League is one of those locations. In South Minneapolis, it's, I believe, Bethel Lutheran Church, I believe, is a voting location over here. And so it just kind of depends, you know, there's locations in St. Paul and Brooklyn Park and Brooklyn Center. And something that I was looking at today was the 11 pop-up locations that you all have, and maybe you can speak to that a little bit. I thought that was really, and I didn't talk about that on the call this morning, and for the next one, I'm like, I have to bring that up because it's a really cool concept. There are 11 in Minneapolis specifically, pop-up one-day locations. And again, when you talk about like being accessible for people and people really meeting people where they are, that's something that's really awesome. But to answer your question with Souls to the Polls, it's through the church, it's with the church, it's meeting people where they are, and it's really tailored to what works for the church. Whether the church has vans and they say, okay, we're gonna drive people because we have seniors and we're gonna all vote this day, or whether they say, okay, we all have our own cars and we're going to eat after, so everybody drive your own car. We do it that way. But again, it's just a chance to really kind of showcase the civic engagement in a nonpartisan way throughout the church. So yes, whereas, you know, on a regular, you're not using the pulpit for politics, but you are saying, hey, this is important. I'm not telling you who to vote for, but I'm telling you that this is important, and do your research. And if you need help doing your research, there's people to help you research, but we need to do our research and vote for people that will really align with our values. And so I'm reminding you from the pulpit to go do this. And so, yeah.
So if I have a church and I have a van or I have a vehicle, you're open to, you know, people
Absolutely
providing drivers, vehicles,
Yes.
things like that.
Yeah, and just working through that strategy. So how I talked about being a resource, working through that strategy. I've had a conversation with a couple of churches about, you know, how do we use those last 2 weeks in October to say, okay, we're gonna do rides to the polls in our vans. A lot of churches meet for Bible study on Wednesdays anyway. So some of them are willing to say, okay, every Wednesday, you know, this 5-hour window, we'll have people here, we'll have volunteers here to do this. We'll help do rides. We can promote that to the larger public. We can promote it within like the neighborhood associations in our area so that people know we're here as a resource. And so, yes, if there are other churches, if there's, you know, sometimes there's youth groups and people that have bands, because it can be done in a nonpartisan way, I'm absolutely willing to like link arms with them and figure out how to be a resource for our community, for all of us.
So if you know somebody with a vehicle or like to participate, or a church like to participate in getting people to the polls, please contact Shamika at Strong Roots Foundation. Now I appreciate Ms. Rochelle. She put a comment in the chat on Zoom. And if you have any comments, or if you would like to us to address something, we got about 10 minutes left. Then we will do that. She said, and this might be geared towards Melanie, I voted via absentee ballot. I had to go to a notary republic to validate the ballot before I filled out the ballot. Then I mailed it out. So you got to get it notarized if you're doing absentee ballot.
That's one option. So you have to have somebody witness your filling out the ballot, and that is meant as a security measure. That's meant so that the witness, so if you witness me filling out my ballot, you're certifying that, yes, she is who she says she is. This is her ballot. She has a right to fill out that ballot. It's a security measure. A witness can be any eligible voter in Minnesota. If you don't have a witness, a notary is another option. So that's
initial off on it or something? If
it
I'm
has
a witness?
Yeah, it has a space for you to sign and give your information.
Oh,
so that
okay.
if something were wrong with my ballot, if I turned out to not be who I said I was, now you've witnessed that, and so then they're also going to contact you as well.
Oh,
So it's really just that security measure.
Okay.
They suspended that rule in 2020 because of COVID, but it's back now as a security measure. So either a witness or a notary.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Now I see, so one of the things we talk about in the community is other laws that updates on laws. So I know we talked about the big one, you know, with the felony voting and things like that. But are there any other law updates that we need to be aware of?
Yeah, there were a lot last year. Going back to who we elected as our state legislature, there were a lot of voting laws that passed last year. Many of them are probably going to go undetected by voters. It just kind of removes some barriers that maybe they weren't even aware of. But another big one is automatic voter registration. So now, if you think about the last time you went to get your driver's license or ID in Minnesota, you had to check a box that says, please register me to vote. We've removed that box, and now if you go to get your driver's license, you're just automatically registered. And so we like to point out, it's automatic for you, the voter. Behind the scenes is anything but. There is a robust security system in place, making sure that
I would say, so I don't have to register because I'm automatically registered?
it's not, and once you update or renew your driver's license.
Oh, wow.
When you interact with the Department of Motor Vehicles.
Okay.
That's when that takes place, and that's applicable for 16 and 17-year-olds too, so that's
Wow.
good to know. But the folks at Department of Motor Vehicles are making sure that they process those registrations to make sure that you show that you are a United States citizen and that you meet those eligibility requirements. And as long as you do, then they'll put you in that pile to be automatically registered to vote. There's an opt-out option on the back end. If you don't want to be registered, they'll send you an opt-out option. But otherwise, you're automatically registered. There was some expansions to the early voting. We've got some expanded hours and locations, like Shamika mentioned. 16 and 17-year-olds can pre-register. There are, now you have the right to time off of work to vote at any point. You had the right to time off work to vote before on election day, but now if you want to go vote early, you have a right to time off work to go vote early. We've expanded some access for our Native communities. They also can request a one-day pop-up site on our Native reservations. And then some laws in place to protect our election officials and then to protect our voters so that you can't be, somebody can't interfere or intimidate you when you're trying to vote.
You know what? I'm glad that's a great segue, because I had a pre-question that came to me. One of our members called, and it was like, I see you're meeting with a representative from the Secretary of State. Can you ask them the question, because there's so much political rhetoric out here. People are emotionally charged, and everybody reacts in a different way. Some even violent, some planning, people hanging out at polls and all that kind of. Has the Secretary of State kind of thought about that in terms of security measures or things to look out for to protect voters and things like that?
Yeah, we have an amazing both physical and cybersecurity team. They're just, anytime I'm in a room with them, I feel like the dumbest person in the world because they're so smart and dedicated. So they're working on this issue all the time. Some things to know, unless you're voting or have a reason to be in the polling place, like you're an election judge, you can't be within 100 feet of a polling place. It's illegal. So if anybody encounters anything when they're going to vote, let our office know or let the county know, and we'll address it immediately because they are not allowed.
Like on voting day, like
Yes.
I can.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we get calls. We get that call occasionally. It doesn't happen a lot, but we do get that call occasionally. And we're in constant communication with the counties. So if there's something going on, we want to know, because you are not allowed within a polling place, 100 feet of a polling place, unless you're voting or working there. You also can't challenge. You hear sometimes people are challenged at the polls, voters challenged. Voters are not allowed to be challenged by anyone unless there is personal knowledge. If the person challenging you has to have personal knowledge about you in order to challenge you. They can't just say, well, you don't look like you belong here. They have to know, I know she lives in St. Paul. Why is she voting here? I know her. They have to have that personal
Wow,
knowledge.
so I didn't even know that.
Yep,
Okay.
yep. So those are a couple of things.
What about when people say stuff like wearing t-shirts and things
Yeah.
like that?
So you can't wear anything that is representative of a candidate or a party on the ballot. So I could
Oh, see, I didn't know that.
actually wear a George Bush or a Bill Clinton t-shirt
Oh, I didn't know that.
because they're not on the ballot. But if
Okay.
it said Republican or Democrat, it couldn't,
Yeah.
it couldn't be that. But you couldn't walk in wearing, the iconic red hat or Tim Walz shirt. Anybody that's on the ballot, you can't wear into the polling place. And the election judges will tell you. They're quick to say, you can't wear that in here. Please take the hat off or go change your shirt. So.
I just want to take the time to really thank all of the election volunteers, the poll workers, man. These are people that are truly dedicated to the process.
Yeah.
That give their entire day, not just on presidential elections, but
Yeah.
these people pretty much work every election.
Mhm.
And they just so nice and courteous and things like that, make sure everything goes smoothly. And they don't just show up that day.
Right.
No, they gotta go through a thing, to make sure that that the election integrity stays. So in these last.
Can I say something real quick about
Mhm.
that? We need 30,000 of them to run a
Oh,
statewide
well,
election.
there you go.
And any eligible voter can serve as an election judge. You mentioned volunteer because many of them volunteer, but you have a right to get paid.
Oh,
At
really?
least minimum wage to serve. That's
Oh.
your right. So whatever minimum wage is for where you live. So serve as an election judge. It's an amazing experience. Also, 16 and 17-year-olds can serve as election judge trainees.
Wow.
So my daughter
And they
did
get
it.
paid?
They get paid.
Wow.
And just like you have a right to time off of work to serve, they have a right to time off school. So when I'm talking to young
Tell
people,
my son in college that.
I tell them, you have a right to skip school and get paid. That's the hook. And it looks amazing on a resume. So
Mhm.
my daughter put it on all of her college applications and it looks good on job resumes. So
Wow.
serve as an election judge or an election judge trainee. We need you.
I'm so glad we did this.
New
So-
initiative for the church.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
And you want the election judges that you see when you walk in to be reflective of the community, right? So we want community
yeah.
members to serve.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So the last thing I want to, because you mentioned a little bit about doing your research. As you
Mhm.
know, a lot of misinformation out there. I mean, it's hard to even decipher, as
Yes.
we scroll and, and the things come up, different pictures and, I mean,
Yes.
oh my
It's
God.
terrible. It's so.
I mean,
terrible.
I've never seen it like this. So
Yeah.
what are some of the strategies from just a community organizer perspective on how we can decipher what's what, what do we need to do to make sure this is real and this is not?
Yes, that is a really, really good question. There is a lot of misinformation out there.
Is there a difference between misinformation and disinformation? Because I hear both of those terms.
I do too, so I take it as misinformation is just things that are just not true. Like, I think in this election, I've seen a lot more of it, of just things that are not true. There's a lot of, on both sides, with just how people get like, oh, well, this is this way, or that is that way, and I don't know where they get it. Like, it's like, did you make that up? Did you see that somewhere? Did we read that somewhere? Or is that what happened? I think that there are certain facts, and I think that it's important for people to really look at those themselves. Like, I think that it's great when you hear talking points and when you hear, we have those people that just won't look for it themselves. They go based off of the talking points. And I just think it's so important with something that's so crucial to really just take a minute. I mean, it doesn't even have to be like a week of research, but to really just take a minute and look at the facts of what they are. Like, who aligns with my values? Like, who, what are the stances on education? What are the stances on crime? What are the stances on just all of these different things that are kind of like core values for being an elected and being a politician? Like, what are those things and what's actually said about it? And so I do think that sometimes looking at, you scroll online and there's just like random sites and random things. I think really finding some of those like vetted resources to say, okay, I'm gonna like compare these two and I'm gonna look at it and really see what the difference is and not get so caught up in like the back and forth jabs of like, I don't like this, I don't like that, or we don't like this, or we don't like that, and not the personal attacks that sometimes go on, because there's a difference between fact and personal attacks.
I would say, I was at a table with a bunch of 18-year-olds that were, say, first year voting, and they was talking in sound bites, and I said, well, how do you know that? Did you look it up? Did you run across it on the scroll while you're scrolling? And what I told them, I said, go to the candidate's website. And something you said, Melanie, it attaches whatever policies that they are saying that they're gonna advocate for and stand for, that connects to their value. Now, then you see, does that connect to my values? So,
MNvotes.gov. We
mnvotes.gov,
have a fact versus fiction page which addresses disinformation, so.
mnvotes.gov is the place to be. They
Yes.
have a fact versus fiction,
Social media toolkit.
social,
The fact versus
yeah,
fiction
social media,
toolkit.
I'm
That's
telling y'all,
great.
you gotta go on their website, anything you need,
That's what
cause
I'm going.
yeah, you go on there and you actually go there and that's where you get the hard information, the actual information.
Yeah.
And then you're able to decipher throughout, and then you get that sample ballot to know who else is on the ballot. Look them up. Don't just say, oh, well, yeah, that name sounds familiar, or oh, I seen this yard sign, you know, or I seen this commercial, so boom. No, let's be educated voters as community members, as people of God, as people with values. Let's know the people that we are putting in those back rooms that doing things that we don't even see that's happening around us, that's impacting everything we do. Are people that we've done our part to put in those places. So, and once again, how do they get in contact with you?
Yes, my phone number is 612-735-5998. Email is strongrootsfoundationmn@gmail.com. And then after this, I will go on and drop that in the chat for people
Yes.
that are online or may watch it later.
And if you know of anybody that need a ride to the poll, email support@greatfriend.org. Support@greatfriend.org, and we will make sure that you get to the polls. Or if you have any additional questions or need us to connect you with Secretary of State or give you the mnvotes.gov website once again, and connect you with Shamika or any other questions that you may have. So I want to just say thank you all for being here tonight. I learned so much. You know, I'm thinking, okay, I'm finna walk us through some basic information, but you all have really taught me a lot, and I hope that those that joined have learned. Those that will join later, I hope that you will learn as well how to be a more educated voter and more involved in the process of creating the Minnesota and the nation that we all want to see. So thank you all. Yeah, have a great night tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
Man. My cup is full. Thanks. It is such two very different